Hello. Yesterday I was speaking about, in video 8, which consists of almost no video and just me, the audio of me speaking. I was speaking about, okay, the masses are weak, what can be done? And I was finalized with that there was a few things that I thought to establish, to give back the rights, to give, right now the governments of the world have the right over us, over people. They can control our bodies, they can control our lives. They could force us to do whatever they want us to do almost. That has to stop. We have to be in control of our bodies. We have to be able to, if we want to go outside and risk getting COVID-19, we should be able to do that. If we want to kill ourselves, we should be able to do that. If we want to put anything in our bodies, drugs, battery acid, as I said yesterday, cement, anything, that's our business. And if, like I said, if we want to kill ourselves, that should be up to us. And if we want to go anywhere that's public land or private land where we have been given permission, we should be able to go there too. Government should not be able to tell us where to go and what to do, as long as it's public land or land where we have an agreement to go. And they certainly do not have the right, in my opinion, and should not have the right to force us to stay alive if we don't wish to, or force us to stay inside under virtual house arrest just because they have to protect us from possibly getting COVID-19. So how do you change that? Well, you have to change the government. And since I want to do it only legally, then the way to do it is to start a political, I decided that the ways to do it were start a political party and try and do it that way. Start a light religion. It's not really religious, it's more just a religion in the tax-free sense. And you can sort of build a sort of communities, small communities here and there that sort of are self-contained and try and live as much legally, but live as much away from government control as possible. And the goals of those things would be to raise enough money to one day lease some land and start our own country the way we want to be started, with the freedom of over our own bodies that we deserve. And when I say we, I mean all human beings. Race, creed, color, whatever, doesn't matter. It's sex, doesn't matter. You're a human, you deserve to have that right as far as I'm concerned, especially if you're a sane adult. And it has to be assumed you are sane until the authorities can prove medically and or psychologically otherwise. So, first one, to start a political party that matches our ideas about personal freedom. Well, I gave it a lot of thought, and before this even, and I've thought about it, and there's many things I think need to be done, but there's 6 important things that I think this political party would need to have. By the way, as a name for it, it's nothing etched in stone. It just came to me at the 2020 party, because it's the year 2020, and because, excuse me, and because hindsight is 2020. I mean, we're learning from our mistakes, we're learning from our past, so that's why I call it 2020 party. It doesn't have to be that, it's just a name I came up with. Anyway, there's lots of lots of goals that I would want it to have, lots of political positions I would have with it. But the 6 main ones that I would want would be, 1, I'll list the 6 and then I'll explain them a bit afterwards. The first one is, number 1, women must run all governments, plus both as politicians and bureaucrats. And yes, I am a heterosexual man. 2, women, and I don't want to be a woman. That's what I believe. I'll explain it in a minute or two. Number 2, women and a few men must raise their preschoolers themselves. Daycares must never be funded, subsidized by government again. 3, men and women that wish to must run the economy any way they see fit, outside of fraud, environmental, and possibly health and safety laws. No assistance, no limitations, no corrupt central banks. Hire, fire anyone they wish for any reason they wish. No government bailouts, ever. Quote, let the buyer beware, unquote, would be the economy's motto. If you fuck up, you're on your own. 4, 14 to 17-year-olds must be allowed to vote, drive, live on their own, and work full-time jobs. 5, sane adults, or just adults, it'll be assumed we're all sane, adults 18 plus must have complete control over their bodies. We must be able to consume anything we wish, drugs, alcohol, battery acid, anything. I keep saying battery acid for some reason. Killing ourselves whenever we wish, live our lives as recklessly as we want to, regardless of the danger, so long as these actions do not directly cause physical harm to others. And 6, every law-abiding citizen must have automatic access to clean, safe shelter, food, water, clothing, internet, full health care, and free local transit. Okay, now to explain each one. Women must run all governments. Right now in the United States, roughly 90% of inmates are men. We men just have too many negative instincts we've had since, I don't know, caveman days. We've got a much stronger drive for sex, for power, for control, for violence, to conquer, for competition. We are too easily corrupted because we have too many negative desires, too many negative wants, too many negative instincts. It's not our fault we've got them. It's our fault what we do with them. If we let them go to our heads too much, then it's our fault. But it's not our fault that we have them. But we have them, and it's getting in the way, especially in politics. It's the worst thing to have those kind of base drives, those negative base drives in politics, because all it does is lead to all it does is lead to corruption. You want politicians and bureaucrats to be above all that shit. You want them to be as decent and as carefree about, as lust-free for to fulfill your own selfish goals. And women are better at that than men. It's just the way they are. They're more compassionate. This is in generality. This is not every woman and this is not every man by any stretch, obviously. There's lots of terrible women out there. There's lots of wonderful guys out there. But I'm just saying that the average woman is better suited because they have less, instinctive negative baggage than men do. So I think it needs that women, for at least 20 years, need to run the government. And I don't just mean run the government. I mean run the government and the bureaucracy. And that means every government position. That means federal government police. That means government full-time military. That means government full-time any healthcare, any government healthcare. I believe in two-tiered healthcare, by the way. I believe in public healthcare for all those that need it and private healthcare for all those that can afford it. And I would say that you pass a law that bans men from running for the election. Any men that are in government or in these positions can stay there until their term is up. But no new men can go into can go into the police, the military, full-time. The reserves, as many men as you want, but not in the full-time military. The full-time military should be, the police, it's a place that you need to be above corruption, and men are more easily corrupted than women. It's the way it is, with exceptions. The military, you want peace-loving people. You don't want people that are itching for blood and itching for violence and itching for glory and itching for combat. You want the opposite in your peacetime military. You want people that are incredibly well-trained but don't want to fight. It's looked upon as a failure, as a last resort. You don't want anybody bloodthirsty in your full-time military, especially at the top. So in the reserves, that's fine, because then you don't need it, because you only use those during war, and you'll need it then. But in peacetime, you want as peaceful a military as possible. Well-trained, well-equipped, but peaceful. If that makes sense. It does to me. If it doesn't to you, well, tough. So I want all women running the government. And I want it that way for 20 years to see how it works out. Men have had it their way for thousands of years. It's time we give women a chance. Number two is women must raise their preschoolers. Okay, women, I don't want to get too carried away on this because I have very strong feelings about this. I Let's just put it this way: the most important time of a preschooler's life is of a child's life, maybe an adult's life, is 1 to 5. The age is 1 to 5, from birth to 5 years old, before they go to school full time. That's when they need the guidance of a loving parent, someone that loves them unconditionally. Now, I don't think most parents even love their children unconditionally, but certainly the people that should love them the most will be the parents. And generally speaking, women make better parents than men. Not always, definitely not always, but usually. They just, again, there's that carrying the baby, having the baby. It builds a bond that men just cannot understand. I don't care if you disagree, you're wrong. There are exceptions, of course, but generally women are better at it. That's why I'm getting on women for this. But I'm getting on men too, though. Whoever it is, either parent has to start raising their children and stop throwing them in daycare just for your own selfish needs. If you're rich, it's disgusting. If you're middle class, there's little excuse. You can work at home. You just can't. You can raise them. You just have to wait 5 years until they start going to school full time, and then you can go back to your career. You'll just have to drive one car instead of two. You'll just have to wait buying a house for 4 or 5 years. What's more important, your child's life or your bloody house? And the poor, well, there's plenty of welfare. I've known people that raise children on welfare. It can be done. And if it can't done where you live, go someplace where it can. And then when you're done, then you can come back to your friends and your family. But your child should be the most important thing in your life, not your career. So as far as I'm concerned, preschooling, daycare, although daycares, I'm not knocking them. Some aren't very good, but some are great. And they perform an incredibly important service. But I despise that they exist. Children should be raised by their parents, not by virtual strangers, who, by the way, aren't paid nearly enough money. So government should stop funding and subsidizing daycares. And women should go back to raising children. Men too, if they want, but women primarily should go back to raising their children, their preschoolers. As soon as they're ready for regular school, fine, go back to your career. But 6 years off, 5 years off to have your child ain't going to kill you. 3, men must run the economy any way they see fit. Well, since men are going to be in this situation, having the babies, having them, and then when they're done, going back to bureaucracy, running the countries and running the bureaucracy, then they could certainly run the economy. But I think the economy is why am I talking so loud? The economy is something that, sorry about that if it was too loud. I guess I get a bit carried away. The economy is something where men's negative traits are actually good. I mean, a lust for power, a lust for greed, a lust for control, a lust for competition. Those are good things for the economy, a free market economy. And that's the best economy. The free market economy is the best economy, that's period. Compare the 1920-21 depression, how that was handled with free market economics and small government, and compare the Great Depression in 1920-30 onwards, and how that was handled with massive monetary spending, huge government control, and the New Deal. And it was a disaster. People think it was handled great. It was handled terrible. The 2021 depression was handled far better. And the government and the central banks are intervening right now, and they're destroying the economy. They're making the rich richer, the middle class smaller, and the lower class much bigger. And the wealth gap is growing massively, and the debt is just getting out of control. This is even before COVID-19 and all that crap, all that, paranoia started. This is it's gotten ridiculous. And we need to go back to free market economics. And men are best suited for this. And they need and women, if they're going to run the government, they need to leave the economy alone. I'm talking too loud again. They need to leave the economy alone. They need to let the men run the economy. Now, and women too. But the economy must be allowed to run itself. Stay out of it. Stop propping it up and bailing it out and all that other crap. If you're too weak to get into the economy, then don't get into it. And if you get into it and you get screwed, tough. You shouldn't be putting money into the economy you can't afford to lose anyway. Number 4, so free market economics. 4, 14 to 17-year-olds must be allowed to vote, drive, live on their own, and work full-time jobs. I think either you're going to get this or you're not. I don't think I can convince you of it. It's just, I'm not saying the other points I made could convince you either, but it's just time. You know, if a 14-year-old can have a child and raise it legally, then they're old enough to drive, they're old enough to vote, they're old enough to live on their own and mature enough, and they're old enough to work full-time. Now, they can't, I think, legally work full-time now, but they can't, most of them can't, well, almost none of them can vote. Few of them can drive. By the way, in Canada, apparently, you're allowed to fly a plane by yourself at 14, but you can't drive? Well, that makes sense. In the States, it's 16, I think. And you should be able to live on your own. So, no, 14 to 17-year-olds, you should be able to be pre-adults. You're not quite adults. I don't think you should be allowed in the military or in the police force. Or run for political office yet, or be able to do, you know, because I believe all drugs should be legalized. So I don't think you should be allowed to do heroin or coke or anything like that. Just minor drugs like pot and maybe ecstasy or something, and, you know, light beer, drink light beer or something. But until they're 18, and then they have all those rights. But anyway, 14 to 17-year-olds must be allowed to vote, drive, live on their own, and work full-time jobs. 5. Sane adults, well, just adults 18 plus, must have complete control over their bodies. Well, this goes along with what's going on with COVID-19. I mean, we have to be able to have, and I said this at the beginning of the video, we must have the right to be able to do anything we want to ourselves if we're adults, and it's assuming that we are sane. We should be able to kill ourselves. We should be able to live recklessly. As long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, that is our business and not the government's. Right now, the government has control of our bodies. We must take that back. This is critical. We must take that power back. And not just as I said in another video, I think it was number 7, we have to make the penalty for the politicians taking away our right to freedom, that they get into trouble, that they go to jail, that they can't be politicians anymore. We have to punish people. Don't just put in a constitution it's illegal to do this or that. You have to set out the penalty, or the punish, or the law means nothing. If I make a law that says you can't rape anybody, but I don't specify if I don't specify any punishment, then you go before a judge and you go, okay, well, I did it. Now what? Nothing, because there's no punishment laid out. Okay, goodbye. You've got to put the punishment in there. There's no point saying it's illegal if you don't lay out the punishment for breaking that law. So that has to be changed. And by the way, I think women will be better if they're in government. I think they'll be more likely to give us that power. I mean, they'll be part of them. This sounds a bit sexist, but they'll be a part of them. I think women are more empathetic generally than men, certainly outwardly. So I think there'll be part of them that says, well, we don't want you to kill yourself. We don't want you to do that. But I think there'll also be a part of them that'll say, you know, we don't have the right to order you around. But even if that isn't the case, and I could be wrong about that, it could be the opposite. It could be the instinct of a woman is to control somebody who wants to do harm to themselves. But the fact remains, it's been a male-dominated world, and they refuse to give us our right to our own bodies. So it ain't working. So it's time. Yes, women are in politics now, but not enough yet. So it's time to give women a try. Maybe they'll let us have it, because men sure as shit won't. So it's time to give women a try. And then if they can't do it, well, then I don't know what the fuck to do. Then there's other options. You know, start a country, leave, whatever. Legal ones, and non-violent ones. Always non-violent, by the way. I don't want violent. I don't want to get freedom if it means killing people or using violence. That's just wrong. And last, number 6, is every law-abiding human must have automatic access to clean, safe shelter, food, water, clothing, internet, full health care, free local transit. And what I mean by that is you don't get a check. If you need welfare, you go to this shelter in a city. It'd be near a city or just the outskirts of a city, and you would get At most, you would get a 200 square foot apartment, and that's it. No bigger than that. It would have everything. It would have a tiny bathroom and a tiny kitchenette, and it would have a bed and a desk or a chair, and that's it. And a place and adequate adequate closet space. But that's it. It would be tiny, not claustrophobically tiny, but it would be small, and it would not be luxurious in any way. But you could live with it if you had to, but you wouldn't want to probably. And give you enough water and basic clothing and the internet. You got to have the internet. Internet now is almost a right. You have to have the internet, or you're not even part of the world, really. And full health care, and free local transit so you can get around. Now, there's two reasons I want this. One, because three actually. One, because welfare right now is ridiculous. It's incredibly inefficient. It's full of fraud. People spend, to expect, if you give people cash and if they're unhappy, and to expect them not to buy things that make them happier, like drugs or alcohol or lottery tickets or fast food that's bad for your pizza or something, you're crazy. They're not going to just spend it on stuff they need. They're going to spend on stuff they want as well as what they need. Because they're unhappy and they want to feel better, and they have limited options, so they do it those ways. I'm not saying that's a good idea, but it's understandable. So you don't want to give them cash, and that's even ignoring all the hardcore fraud that goes on, but just on a very small scale. I don't feel like taxpayers should be giving money to people on welfare just so they can buy lottery tickets and, as well as food and rent, but they can buy lottery tickets and, and Big Macs and pizzas and beer and cigarettes and, stuff like that, and pot. So so that's one. It's just a very, very inefficient way to do it. Two, and this way you have the inmates, the people on welfare would actually work at these shelters. You'd have some bureaucrats watching over them, but the people living in the shelters, they do the work, they make the meals, they clean it, they run it, and when it's being built, they help build it. And so the costs are very, very low, and the maintenance costs are low. And the structures would be very simple, reinforced concrete, preferably stainless steel rebar, so they last forever. And, that last for like 100 years, so they need minimal maintenance and very simple to look after, and very cheap. And you just have these regional centers at every major regional area. And if you want welfare, you go there. And if you don't, and if you're not prepared to go there, well, then you're not getting any. So that's it. Much, much cheaper. The other thing is that I think every person should have that right. I don't think people should ever worry about starving to death or not having basic health care or basic food or basic water or basic shelter. That's something people should not have to worry about. It really needs to be a right that everyone has that. And I know the libertarian way is like, and I agree with some things the libertarians say definitely, but this one isn't one of them. They say basically that, when it comes to welfare, you're on your own. We leave it up to welfare, or we leave it up to charities, we leave it up to your friends and family, and you leave it up to yourself. No, because sometimes those things are going to fall through, and there's not always going to be charity around to help you or family or something. So you need a safety net. And so I'm saying every person should have this right. And there's another reason I'm thinking this as well. So everyone should have these things, minimum. And if it's provided that way, it'll cost less than welfare does now, surely. And the third thing is, if you do this, if you provide these things, then you automatically take away a lot of the incentive to have minimum wage. I don't agree with minimum wage. I understand it, but I don't agree with it. You take away a lot of rights of controlling how governments, like right now governments can say, especially left-wing governments can say things like, well, we need to control the economy so poor people can have a job and keep and look after themselves. Well, if the government's already giving them the basics of life, then they can't say that anymore because they already have the basics. It's guaranteed to them without them raising a finger. Well, they have to, and that's, by the way, that's the other thing. If you were physically and mentally able, if you lived, I said that, you'd have to work in these places as well, these shelters. But it wouldn't be much. It'd be like at maximum 24 hours a week because you have to leave time for people to find jobs. not work them to death too. I mean, it's 24 hours maximum. So 20 to 24 hours maximum. So but if you take away that concern, that fear, then you take away all the justification for all the moral justification for, you can't say a minimum wage has to be a living wage because they already have a living wage. In essence, they have the basics of life. They don't need a living wage. So you take away the need for that. You take away the need to stimulate the economy from a moral perspective. You take away the moral perspective for the scum of the financial sector, central bank. I despise central banks. God, I detest them. They are evil incarnate, even if they don't mean to be. They're either evil or staggeringly ignorant when it comes to macroeconomic ideas. Oh, I despise corrupt politicians, but I despise the central banks a whole lot more. The biggest problem in this world right now, certainly financially, are central banks. Financially is definitely central banks. But anyway, so these, by having these basics, then you take away the moral incentive. I've said this already. Moral incentive for the government to butt into the economy. This allows the economy to be able to be free. So anyway, that's what I feel about those things. That's what I would like to do. I'll talk. I might talk more about it. I'll make a recording tomorrow. I'm not sure what I'm not sure what it's about yet. But I'm writing a book right now about these things. So I'm started a few days ago. I'm about 40% through. So hopefully be done in a couple of weeks. So that's what I think about this so far. I'll talk more about the other things going forward. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.